I woke up Tuesday morning expecting the same quiet routine I'd earned after a lifetime of chaos. Coffee. Sunrise. Silence. Instead, I stepped onto my porch in a bathrobe and stared at a crime scene. 3 years of work, gone. My hedge wall wasn't trimmed. It wasn't damaged. It was erased, chainsawed down to knee-high stumps like someone had scalped my land overnight. Fresh sawdust lay everywhere. Branches were piled like bodies. The air still smelled of diesel and hot metal from wood chippers that had clearly worked long and hard before dawn. And beneath those hedges, ripped out and tossed aside like trash, were my memorial roses. 3 bushes. 3 names. 3 brothers I lost overseas who never got to grow old, argue with HOAs, or drink coffee on a quiet porch. Their roses were scattered across the dirt, roots exposed, petals crushed. I didn't yell. I didn't curse. I didn't panic. Anger burns fast. This wasn't anger. This was the calm that comes right before a man decides he's done being polite. Most people would call a lawyer, file complaints, beg a bureaucracy for mercy. But I'm a Navy Seabee. We don't beg, we build. And when someone declares war on sacred ground, you don't rebuild a hedge. You build something that makes them regret waking up that morning. My name's Jack Thompson, but everyone calls me Tank. Picked it up overseas when I welded a busted bridge plate in 30-foot seas while everyone else puked over the rails. I spent 22 years building runways, bridges, and forward bases in places the news only talks about when things go wrong. Now I live in Eagle Crest, one of those upscale developments where every mailbox costs more than your first car, and the HOA fines you if your trash can blinks at the sun too long. I landed there after what I called divorce math. My ex got the house, the cars, half my pension, and the dog. I got a corner lot near the main entrance, a pickup truck older than some board members' kids, and an alimony payment that keeps my grocery list humble. But that corner lot was peace. Awkward shape, wedged between a retention pond and a utility easement. The developer sold it cheap because no one could build a mansion there. Perfect for a guy who just wanted quiet. I spent 3 years turning that dirt into something that felt like healing. A small workshop, a vegetable patch, and a living wall of hedges, privet, holly, cherry laurel, that I nursed through droughts and ice storms. Every Saturday morning, coffee in hand, pruning shears clicking like a metronome, reminding me that growth takes patience. Those hedges weren't landscaping. They were therapy. And buried beneath them, where no one could mess with them, were my memorial roses. That's when Amanda Reynolds decided I didn't fit the picture. Amanda was the HOA Architectural Review Chair. Blonde, perfect teeth. Drove a white Lexus that had never met dirt. She had a voice that could turn "how lovely" into a threat and a smile that made you double-check your wallet. She loved words like aesthetic harmony and property value optimization. She also had a side business, Reynolds Design Group, that just happened to get most of the HOA's landscaping contracts. I should have paid attention when she started showing up to meetings with poster boards about gateway visibility. I didn't. I believed in minding my own business. So when I saw 3 landscapers loading my hedge into a wood chipper, I thought it was a mistake. The crew chief, Luis, decent guy, looked sick when he handed me the work order. Emergency removal. Sightline violation. Signed by Amanda herself. Emergency. On my private property. Without notice. Then I saw what they'd done to the roses. Something inside me went very still. I documented everything. Photos. Video. GPS timestamps. License plates. Military habit paperwork wins wars long after the shooting stops. When I called the HOA office, I got voicemail. When I called the landscaping company owner, he sighed. Said the job was rushed, paid in cash. And here's the part that stuck. Amanda told them I'd be out of town. Someone had been watching me. 3 days later, I got a letter congratulating me on my improved property compliance. Included was a glossy brochure recommending approved plants, available exclusively through Reynolds Design Group for the low price of $8,500. That's when the picture snapped into focus. They destroyed my hedges to create a problem, then sold me the solution. Insurance didn't cover it. Landscaping never does, unless you pay extra. $3,000 in plants. Years of labor. Gone. So I started attending HOA meetings. And let me tell you, those meetings weren't governance. They were theater. Amanda ran them like a queen holding court, gavel snapping like a starter pistol. That's when I learned about the Community Beautification Initiative. $200,000 in special assessments. Guess who won the contract? Guess who approved it? Guess who signed the work order to destroy my hedge wall? Then I found something better. Buried in meeting minutes was a vote reclassifying my lot as a gateway enhancement zone. No notice. No consent. Closed session. Illegal under state open meeting laws. They didn't just cut my hedges. They overplayed their hand. 2 weeks later, Amanda escalated. I came home to find a bright orange violation notice on my door. Unapproved storage of building materials. The materials were 6 shipping containers I just bought, sitting exactly where the delivery truck dropped them. 72 hours to remove them. $200 per day fines after that. She knew I couldn't afford to move them fast. She wanted me in violation. Once that happens, liens follow. So instead of panicking, I filed a construction permit with the county. Purpose: environmental screening structures for agricultural use. Turns out my deed included a grandfathered agricultural exemption from before Eagle Crest was developed. As long as I maintained productive land use, I was exempt from certain HOA restrictions. That exemption was about to become my favorite weapon. I designed something that didn't need HOA approval. Something temporary under county code. Something industrial, legal, and immovable without heavy equipment. 6 shipping containers, placed carefully. Angled deliberately. Not a wall. A system. Amanda hated them immediately. She hired a law firm, sent cease and desist letters, filed county complaints claiming safety hazards and aesthetic damage, even reported me to environmental authorities for running an illegal salvage yard. That's when the landscaping owner called me back, voice shaking. Amanda had asked him to sabotage my containers, damage them accidentally. Insurance would cover it. She even discussed payment. He recorded everything. That recording turned this from a civil dispute into something much more serious. But the real twist came from my neighbor, Martha Collins, who'd lived there since the beginning. She showed me original surveys. My lot extended 12 feet farther than anyone realized. The entrance fountain, Eagle Crest's pride and joy, on my land. Built without permission. No easement. 5 years of trespass. Better yet, the entire area was designated a protected environmental buffer zone. Destroying my hedges violated federal and county regulations tied to the development's original funding. Amanda didn't just mess with the wrong homeowner. She threatened the legal foundation of the entire neighborhood. I didn't reveal that yet. Instead, I finished building. From the road, it looked like industrial art. Ugly enough to ruin their photo ops. Legal enough that no one could touch it. And inside, a funnel. One way in, no way out, unless you knew exactly what you were doing. Amanda was about to find out, and she was going to bring witnesses. The week after Martha showed me those old survey maps, I slept like a man who finally found the high ground. Not because the situation was over, because it wasn't. Not even close. But because I now understood something Amanda Reynolds didn't. She thought this was a normal HOA fight. A few threats, a few fines, maybe a lawyer letterhead big enough to scare a working man into folding. What she didn't know was that she'd stepped into the kind of conflict I spent 2 decades preparing for. The kind where you don't swing first. You document. You build leverage. You let the other side hang themselves with their own rope. And in my case, the rope was 12 feet of forgotten property line and a fountain sitting on my land like a stolen trophy. I kept my mouth shut and my hands busy. During the day, I ran my welding shop. At night, I welded under work lights, sparks spitting into the winter air, while the neighborhood sat behind their perfectly trimmed shrubs pretending none of this was happening. The containers were already in place, but the fortress wasn't finished. The containers were just the bones. What I was building inside was the muscle. The entry lane looked harmless on purpose. I mounted a clean little sign near the road. Nothing flashy, nothing illegal. Just a simple visitor parking gang with an arrow. I'd learned in the Navy that people follow signs the way moths follow porch lights, especially when they think they're in charge. I angled 2 containers to form an easy entrance that looked wide enough for a Lexus, a Mercedes, a BMW, whatever these people like to lease. The first turn was gentle, encouraging. The second turn tightened. Not too much, just enough that you felt committed. The third turn was where regret began to bloom. Because by then, you couldn't reverse without scraping. And you couldn't turn around because there wasn't room to swing a cat, much less a luxury SUV. It wasn't a trap in the cartoon sense. It wasn't spikes or pits or anything stupid like that. It was geometry. It was physics. It was the simple truth that once a vehicle enters a narrowing corridor with imperfect angles, pride will push it forward long after common sense begs it to stop. Then came the gate. The gate was my favorite part because it required no electricity, no remote control, no fancy electronics that could malfunction, and give an HOA lawyer something to argue about. It was a counterweight system built from salvaged garage door parts and steel I had lying around. I welded a hinge mount to one container corner, built a reinforced arm, and hung weight plates like old gym equipment on the far end. Then I installed a pressure plate in the ground. Nothing dramatic, just a reinforced steel panel over compacted gravel. When a vehicle rolled onto it, the plate dipped slightly. That dip pulled a linkage. The linkage released the counterweight. The counterweight swung the gate shut behind them with a deep, satisfying clunk. No power, no code. No button. Just gravity doing what gravity does. I tested it with my pickup again and again, adjusting the sensitivity until it triggered at exactly the moment a driver was too far in to back out comfortably. Every test ended with me getting out, walking around, checking clearances like a pilot doing pre-flight. It wasn't paranoia. It was professionalism. Meanwhile, Amanda was getting loud. She started parading her little army around the neighborhood like she was rallying troops. She showed up on people's porches in tennis skirts with clipboards. She checked sightlines at the entrance. She held impromptu conversations where she somehow always ended up mentioning how industrial structures could hurt resale values. She'd stand near my property line with 2 other board members, pointing and whispering like I couldn't hear them. They weren't subtle. The official stuff arrived too. Another violation notice. Then another, visual nuisance, community disharmony, unapproved exterior alteration. One notice had the nerve to include a suggested resolution that involved hiring Reynolds Design Group for professional concealment landscaping. $8,000 again. Different brochure. Same scam. I didn't respond to the HOA letters. I responded to the county. I submitted my paperwork like I was filing mission reports. Permit application. Environmental screening purpose. Agricultural exemption documentation. Survey copies. Photos of the previous hedge wall and memorial roses. Photos of the chainsaw damage. Work order signed by Amanda. Certified letter they sent congratulating themselves for destroying my property and offering to sell me an expensive fix. I filed a formal complaint about unauthorized vegetation removal in a designated buffer zone. I also filed a complaint about the fountain. Here's what people don't understand. Bureaucracy is slow, but it's relentless. Once you start the process the right way, it doesn't matter how rich someone is or how polished their Lexus looks. Paperwork rolls downhill, and it crushes whatever is in the way. Within a week, a county environmental tech called me back with a tone that said he was used to nonsense, but this was interesting nonsense. He asked if I had documentation. I told him I had more documentation than a courthouse. Then, the best thing happened. The community started talking. At first, they kept it quiet. People would wave at me like normal, then speed walk away. But one afternoon, I was welding and I heard someone say my nickname softly from behind. Tank? I turned, mask up, holding my torch like a question mark. A man in his 50s stood near my driveway, hands in his jacket pockets, eyes darting like he was scared the HOA might pop out of a bush. My name's Mark, he said. Oak Ridge Drive. Amanda hit us with fines last year. My wife's butterfly garden. Said it was inconsistent with approved flora themes. I stared at him. Flora themes. He nodded like the words tasted bitter. We spent $2,000 removing it. My wife cried. Not 10 minutes later, another neighbor came. A younger guy, work boots, oil-stained hands. Nick, he said. Plumber. They fined me for parking my company van in my own driveway. Said it was commercial storage. A third neighbor came days later. An older woman, short, tough eyes, the kind who'd lived long enough to stop fearing other people's opinions. I'm Diane, she said. Across the street. They threatened me for hanging laundry outside. Said it looked poor, that was the word. Not in writing, of course. They never put the real word in writing. But Diane said Amanda had smiled and used her "how lovely" voice when she said it. Poor. That's when I realized what this really was. It wasn't a hedge wall. It wasn't roses. It was control. Amanda wasn't enforcing rules. She was sculpting a neighborhood into her image and punishing anyone who made the gateway look less like a magazine spread. Which made the magazine photo shoot detail even uglier. I asked around. Quietly. The way you ask questions when you want answers, not gossip. A teenager who delivered flyers told me he saw a photographer at the entrance that Tuesday morning. A woman walking her dog said she watched a lady in white directing workers with her hands. A guy who jogged in the morning said he heard the wood chipper and assumed someone had hired landscaping until he saw my hedge wall missing the next day. So the story was out there, spreading through Eagle Crest like smoke. And Amanda knew it. That's why she went nuclear. The law firm's letter arrived on heavy paper. Threatening language. Words like injunctive relief. Accusations that I was knowingly diminishing community value. They demanded I remove the containers immediately and restore my property to compliance. They also threatened a court order to freeze any further construction. But here's the thing. They were trying to fight me in the HOA arena. I wasn't in that arena anymore. I was in county jurisdiction, environmental regulation, property line law, trespass, unauthorized construction. All things that made HOA bylaws look like a kid's coloring book. I took the law firm letter, made copies, and handed it to my attorney. VA benefit consult. $400. That felt like a steal. My attorney leaned back in his chair, looked at my survey maps, looked at the fountain photos, looked at the buffer zone designation, and then looked at me like I was holding a loaded weapon. "They built that fountain on your property?" he asked. "Yep." "And destroy protected screening vegetation without notice?" "Yep." He tapped his pen. "If this is accurate, they're in deep trouble." That night, I updated my security cameras. Not HOA cameras. Agricultural protection. My vegetable patch was now officially a productive operation. Tomatoes. Beans. Herbs. Enough to satisfy the exemption. Enough to justify surveillance against theft and vandalism. And thank God I did. Because the landscaping owner, Carlos, called me again, voice lower than before. Like he was afraid his phone was bugged. "Tank," he said, "I need you to hear this." I recorded it. He played the audio. Amanda's voice. Clear as day. Telling him she needed my containers accidentally damaged. Suggesting it happened during routine work so insurance would cover replacement. Offering cash. Talking like she was ordering a latte, not planning a felony. Carlos sounded sick. "I got kids," he said in the recording. "I'm not doing that." Amanda laughed. Actually laughed. The sound made my jaw tighten so hard I felt it in my neck. I told Carlos to back up the recording. Multiple copies. Cloud. Email. A thumb drive he kept away from his house. I told him I'd handle the rest. Then I handed that recording to the sheriff's office. Not the HOA. Not some community mediator. The sheriff. Because conspiracies don't get solved at board meetings. They get solved under badges. The deputy who took the report didn't say much, but his eyes changed when he listened. He asked me to forward the file. He asked me if I had a timeline. He asked me if Amanda had previously ordered property damage. I handed him my binder. Yes, I had a binder. I'd built forward bases in war zones. I wasn't about to lose a suburban fight because I didn't organize my paperwork. The deputy nodded slowly like a man watching a chessboard. "Okay," he said. "We'll look into it." After that, my job was patience and finishing the fortress. I bolted reinforcement plates to the containers where angles might catch a bumper. Not to damage vehicles, just to make sure the containers didn't take a hit and shift. I lined the inner corridor edges with reflective tape at driver height, so nobody could claim they couldn't see. Everything was safe. Everything was legal. Everything was designed to make any argument against it fall apart. Then I waited for Amanda to do what people like Amanda always do when they think they're losing. She doubled down. Martha kept feeding me updates from inside the neighborhood grapevine. Amanda was frantic. Calling attorneys. Calling the county. Calling board members. She held emergency discussions with realtors about the entrance view. She tried to convince people my containers were a threat to safety. She told residents I was unstable. She implied I was dangerous because of my military background. She whispered that veterans could be unpredictable. That one hit different. But then something beautiful happened. People didn't nod along the way they used to. They started pushing back. Because everyone had their own story, and my fortress gave them courage. They'd watched Amanda chainsaw Memorial and thought, if she can do that to Tank, she can do anything to the rest of us. By early December, Amanda announced a property value impact tour for prospective buyers. She was bringing clients to the entrance to prove my containers were hurting the neighborhood. Martha heard the date, December 15th. I smiled so hard my face hurt. Because December 15th was the day my permit inspection was scheduled. And it was also the day my gate would do exactly what it was designed to do. Amanda didn't know it yet. But she was about to drive straight into my geometry, and once she did, I wasn't going to yell. I wasn't going to threaten. I was going to stand there with coffee in my hand, calm as sunrise, while the world watched her learn what happens when you declare war on sacred ground. That Tuesday morning had started with sawdust and diesel. This next Tuesday was going to end with cameras, badges, and a survey map spread out like a flag. And Amanda Reynolds, HOA Princess of Eagle Crest, was about to find out the difference between a homeowner who complains and a CB who builds.